Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I want to talk about a few things surrounding shapes. Yes, I am making an entire video about shapes, and that may sound a little bit weird, but just trust me for a second. It's gonna be good. So I want to talk about all of the nuances to building with shapes because I've talked a lot about carving and cutting in that technique, but I feel like this is a really good basis for a lot of people, and it could really help a lot of people out to know some of these things. And if you do know some of them from the tutorials, for example, hopefully the nuances that I provide here can still surprise you, or maybe just help or remind you of something that you may have forgotten. But if you do like this sort of video that's more in depth about the smaller things, please let me know in the comments down below. Feel free to like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, but no pressure as always. So starting off, we're going to go right in with this first video. So here I want to talk about the various holes, if you will. So the reason that I actually want to bring this up is because I know a lot of people know this exists, or maybe you don't know it exists, and I feel like a lot of people don't quite know what the uses for it are, though. So starting off with this section, to get to this menu, when you're holding a shape that you want to place down within a sculpture, just hold L1 and press square, or hold triangle and press square if you're using the move controller, and it will bring you into the options menu for that shape where you can increase the hole size. Now for the cube, obviously there's not a whole lot to do there other than maybe make a house like I showed you there, but it acts kind of like creating a shell of that. The sphere here is a little bit different though, because, well, for one, it still hollows it out, but it doesn't hollow it out vertically. So you can kind of see here, but I'm going to switch to a not whole sphere, but you can see this is a great way to create a hollow sphere, or, some kind of Death Star shape, apparently. The issue is when you do decide to paint with it, like I just did, or smear with it, I suppose you could say, it doesn't quite work the same. So, for example, if I cut into it here, you can kind of see that it looks like a strange worm sculpture. It's quite weird and hard to explain, but there is an easy way around that. If you did want to create that sort of shape, while I'm here, I just decided to show you. You could easily take a longer sphere and kind of stretch it out in the same options menu that you would add the hole for, and it will give you this sort of like, I don't know really what to call this, a pod shape, maybe? I guess cutting into it will, yeah, like I would say like a pod shape, some kind of alien pod. Sorry if that's horrifying to you, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. It's just a little bit different than I think what you would expect from dragging a sphere, since it turns more into like, what is like an ovular prism? I don't really know if that's the right word. So moving on to the cone, and this is where things start getting quick. There's not a whole lot you can do with that, and there's not a whole lot you can do with the filled donut, but of course you don't really need a hole for a filled donut because, well, there's a not filled donut. The only weird thing is that to create a thinner donut, for example, you do have to kind of shrink any side of it, and it is good for creating any sort of shape like this where you want it to be kind of that hollow cylinder, but you don't want it to just be completely vertical, if that makes sense. You want it to have some sort of worm-like texture, but you can change the textures on top of that in the flex in the options menu of the entire sculpture to make it a little bit more unique or closer to what you're looking for. So with the next few shapes, they all do have holes, but for some reason they don't have sections, which is a little bit weird to me. Again, I'll talk about sections in a little bit, but one of the good things about, and this is the first time we'll see this, you can see that you can actually control the different vertices, the different faces of this shape, and it's weird that you can do it for triangles and a couple other things, but you can't do it for everything. You figure you would be able to drag those edges, like even on the rounded square, you can't do it. It's quite strange. So this one is called the curve. Now, when you bring it out, it just looks very normal, even when you go into the options menu. But you'll notice the same thing from the triangle before, and that's that when you grab this little thing, it creates sections of the curve, kind of in that cylinder-like fashion that we were talking about earlier. Now, the good thing about this, and I'm going to change the color here because it was starting to just look like a hot dog, and that was bothering me for some reason. But obviously, you can scale it, but then pulling it out like this allows you to do quite a few things. Obviously, the end one will just move the end of it, but then you can take the other sections of it and basically have it smooth out into a perfect S shape or whatever you want to make it. And in addition to that, you can take both ends and change the thinness or the thickness of it, and it will automatically like round out all of the edges for the rest of the shape. There aren't a whole lot more shapes for this. Like you can create some sort of hollow, I don't know, what is that, like a rolling hill, I guess. That's kind of what I took it as and started copying it. But it is still incredibly useful, and it's very great for most types of curves and shapes. The only issue is when you want to create something that's not quite as round curved. But now I want to move on to what I was talking about before, and that's the section feature. Now, initially, it just looks like it changes the different corners of the shape, and that's obviously what it does do. But where it really starts being useful is when you add holes to things, because for example here, it doesn't really do much on its own, and you can still stretch it out any way you like. But when you add a hole and then add the section, it changes it into something a lot more useful. For example, taking a quarter of this and adding a hole to the center will easily make a wonderful little stair piece that you could easily use to create stairs if you wanted something like that. Now, moving on to the other options, and this is for stamp shapes particularly, the blend tool is probably the only thing that's really added in this mode. So obviously you can still change the sections, you can still add holes to all the shapes, but the blend tool, and this is probably what they spend the most time talking about in the tutorial, so I'm not going to go crazy in depth with it, but it basically allows you to place a shape within another shape, and it will mold the first shape to stop it from being such a harsh edge between the shape, if that makes sense. But like I said before, adding these sections, even in smear shape, is incredibly useful because you can create pretty much any kind of shape you want. And this is probably where I had the most difficulty initially because I didn't know how to do this. And so I was spending a lot of time taking the full shape and cutting it out to look like something that I wanted to use. But with this, with the sections and the holes, you can really create a lot of quick, pretty well-rounded, or I guess the opposite, well angulared, is that a word? Shapes. So for this part, I wanted to spend a little bit of time just using all of these new things that I've learned since I built this part of the level, which is of course based around SpongeBob, to kind of refine this section. So you'll see that I initially was trying to use this specific shape, which was a half circle with a hole in the middle bit to kind of refine this section, but it wasn't quite working. So I resorted to a longer square rectangular prism, you know, if you know things, and then kind of playing around with them. So if you didn't know, one of the good things about using the DualShock, and of course you can do similar things with the PlayStation Move, but it's being able to very, very finely rotate things using the control sticks. So if you're holding your cursor or imp over some sort of block, even if it's a negative block like this, you can then hold L2 and you can use it just as you use the fine nudge tool to finely rotate something that you're trying to alter. So again, this is just me trying to fix a lot of things that I had kind of gotten down before, but now knowing a little bit more about this, I feel like I'm better here. But you can still take those negative shapes and kind of place them down as that rectangular prism or something and still stretch them afterwards. It is a bit awkward though, because you do have to be targeting a face that is attached to another object of using that negative shape to select the negative shape. So it can definitely be awkward, but it's great for fine tuning every single part of your sculpt. You know, if you're obsessively, well, let's say somewhat of a perfectionist. But if you did notice, by the way, I am using a different color here specifically so you can see the parts that I am changing, but I will change it back and paint over all of this later. It was just a very easy way to show I'm trying to refine this as much as possible and fix these curves because I didn't know any other way to make this shape as industrial as it needed to be. So now after doing all of that, I'm going to remove all the hues from my object so I can repaint it and kind of fix all of the issues that I was having before. Now, it had actually been a while since I worked on this and I forgot some of my own tips for painting. Namely in this first part, you can see I'm trying to use this side of a cube, which is a great way to get a straight line, but not on a section that is, well, not a straight material, you know what I mean? But don't worry, I fixed that later. And same here, see, I'm trying to use it on this curved material and it's just not working. But then I remembered very much later on that it's a silly thing to do because you could really just take that square, make it larger, and then just paint back over it just like that. And it creates a perfectly straight line. And I tried to do it for this, but it wasn't quite working. So instead I just decided to take that white square and kind of paint back over to fix it. But yeah, it's just a quick tip while we're here with shapes and randomness. But if you did enjoy this video on shapes, I know that it was somewhat niche, but hopefully it could help anybody out there that is having some issues with their different create stuff. And I mean, I do say niche, but it is, everybody could use these tips, honestly. So if it's not something that you already knew, great. If it is, well, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully I can have some more advanced tips for you later, but I do hope that some of these were able to help other people out there. And if you have any recommendations for tips and stuff that you saw me doing that maybe there's an easier way to do, please let me know. I would love to check that out, and I would love to include it in a future video. And don't worry, of course, I will credit you for that, because that's the kind of thing it is. I do apologize if I'm quieter today. It's not because I'm less excited. I'm just very clearly watching these videos as I try to narrate them. So hopefully that is not jarring for any of you that are used to me being super high energy and excited about things. These tips videos are a little bit different than reaction videos, but yep, here we are. All right, I hope you guys are doing well. Like I said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. But have a wonderful, wonderful day, and goodbye. Bye, guys.